Hi, sophomores. I recorded the research question video first, but you might be watching this one first because that's the order I put them in for instructions. So let me take a second just to say welcome back. I hope you had a really great break, and I hope that you're at least a little bit excited to get back. Maybe a little bit of structure is a good thing. But either way, I hope you had a good time, and I hope you're ready to go and to learn. We're starting this semester with poetry and with research, and of course our continuation of grammar. Poetry will be the first 3 weeks, and research will be ongoing throughout that as well. Your poetry test, I will post this somewhere, but your poetry test, right now I have it actually for Red Day, it will be January 29th, and for Green Day, it will be February 1st, which is a Monday, and I'm sorry about that. So, okay, I want you to, during this video, I want you to, when I tell you to pause and to read the poem at hand, if you haven't already read all 3 of them, which you may have. But you might want to refamiliarize yourself with each one as I'm about to talk about them, especially this one, which is the longest. I'm not going to sit here and read it to you because I believe in your ability to read it on your own. And I don't know how to say this properly, so I'm going to call this the Soldier of Mictlan. I don't know if that's how you say it or not, but it's good enough. Okay. So I tried to give you a little background information for each poem, so hopefully you did, and I will go ahead and read the background information. It says, in Aztec mythology, Mictlan was the land of the dead, or the underworld. Although most souls apparently reached Mictlan, the journey there was long and arduous. That means difficult. Warriors and others who died violently could instead go east and accompany the sun, eventually reaching a realm of heaven. If you haven't already read the poem, go ahead and stop the video, read the poem, and then resume when you're ready. Okay, so what I like about this poem, I like knowing that background information. I really feel like it makes a difference, knowing a little bit about what Mictlan is, knowing that it's the underworld. I think it really changes this particular poem. If you didn't know that, and you didn't think to maybe Google it or something like that, you wouldn't know as much about this soldier that marches into Mictlan, in which case we know that he is already dead. Not only is he dead, literally, he seems to be fairly dead inside as well. So I've got some notes down here, so you might see me flipping pages and hear some papers rustling. So notice that of course, the most prominent feature of this poem that really stands out to people is how every single line ends with the word soldier. What I want you to notice is that when we read poetry, we have to remember to read to the punctuation mark instead of just to the end of the line. For example, the first line reads, once upon a time there was a soldier who marched to Mictlan in his soldier boots, and every step was a soldier's step, and every breath was a soldier word. That's the first complete thought. It's not the first line, but it is the first sentence. So whenever a poem breaks up complete thoughts like that, or breaks up sentences like that, and puts line breaks in between, okay, that's called enjambment. Or if you would like to be fancy in French, it's called enjambment. So that's E-N-J-A-M-B-M-E-N-T, enjambment. We are going to talk about that later when we do our poetry notes, which is actually going to be next class, but I thought I would show it to you here since it's so prominent. But when you are reading poetry out loud, you do read it as if you are reading to the end of the line, unless you're doing some sort of a spoken word poetry thing wherein you're stopping and starting for particular reasons, for entertainment effect or for difference in meaning. But if I were to read this poem out loud, I would read it like I just did to you. Once upon a time there was a soldier who marched to Mictlan in his soldier boots, and every step was a soldier's step, and every breath was a soldier word. Do you know what this soldier said? So it reads out loud like prose, but it's written, of course, in poetry, wherein the end of each line is soldier. Of course, that creates a lot of different ideas in my head as to why Rigoberto Gonzalez might have chosen to write the poem this way. For starters, every line repeating the word soldier kind of makes the words line up like a column of actual soldiers, which I think is a neat visual effect. If you just look at the right side of the poem, all you see is soldier, 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 soldier. And I'll tell you, I typed this poem out instead of copying and pasting it from the internet, because I wanted to like go through the process of really deep reading it again, and I thought typing it out would help me do that, and it did. But it did make the word soldier look like it wasn't a real word anymore. Has that ever happened to you? You say or write a word so many times it just looks weird. But it is neat how he creates like a visual army with the poem. Perhaps to emphasize just how many soldiers have died for whatever cause. Maybe in the country of his birth or just all around the world, all throughout time. I also think it's neat how it creates like a regimented sort of effect, like many soldiers that are marching in step. The repetition really enhances the meaning of the poem by emphasizing how the lack of individuality, how war really robs people of their individuality. They're all just soldiers, 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 soldiers. Okay, so those were the things I wanted to tell you about the Soldier of Mictlan. You, of course, have these questions down here to think about. I've kind of touched on some of them already. Some of them you're going to have to interpret on your own. I want you to think about these. Your assignment for today is going to involve, in Canvas, you're going to be answering one of these for me. And then you're going to do that for each poem. So let's move on to elliptical. Elliptical. I'll read the background information as well, like I did before. Ellipses, often represented with punctuation marks known as ellipses points or ... is the omission, often intentional, of a word or words that would be needed for a thought to be complete. Sometimes the missing word or words are understood from context, other times they are left to the reader's imagination. This poem, whose title means involving ellipses, plays with both of these ideas. So if you didn't know that the ... was called ellipses, I think it helps a lot to know and to understand why the title of the poem is, of course, elliptical, which is involving ellipses. If you were thinking of the exercise equipment elliptical, I'm going to see if it's spelled the same real fast. Yeah, I do believe it is elliptical, spelled the same. The only thing that I can think of in terms of the connection there is this idea that the sentence is supposed to keep going, right? The sentence is not complete. And in the same way, elliptical, that's the machines that go like this, and you kind of like gazelle back and forth. And they are, of course, continuing motion. So that would be the connection, in my opinion. But that doesn't really have anything to do with this poem. So if you haven't read this poem yet, go ahead and take a second and then come back. Okay, so with this particular poem, it's a little bit strange. We have a lot of pronouns. We don't exactly know who we're talking about here because it's almost always referred to the group of people or whoever is being discussed here is referred to as they or we. So I think that when we ask ourselves, you know, the reason for that, okay? And the reason for the use of ellipses in the poem, I think we have to consider the fact that the poet, Harriet Mullen, is most likely trying to make sure that we are not, or that we are aware of the fact that we often make assumptions about entire groups of people. So, for example, they just can't seem to, they should try harder to, they ought to be more. I feel like our brains automatically start to fill in the blanks with a group of people or groups. Did I just say groups of people? With a group of people that we automatically feel this way about. We're able to like complete the sentences and the thoughts on our own, with our own perhaps biased or at least judgmental opinions. You may also ask yourself, what is, and that kind of gets around to what is the speaker's attitude towards them, they, we. Well, most specifically them and they. And you can see how very judgmental and negative it is. But it does shift as well. There's a shift but we know how difficult it is for them. Right? There's a little bit of a shift in tone there. All right, what else did I want to tell you about this poem? Let's see. Well, this poem does leave you to fill in the gaps a lot, doesn't it, right? When we talk about literal interpretation of poems, okay, this one doesn't give us much to go off of, right? I mean, we're given the beginnings of thoughts, and then the usage of the ellipses requires the reader to fill in the gaps in what is being expressed, which makes it much more individual in a way. And again, goes back to helping us understand how we may be being judgmental in our own way towards groups of people. So, again, just like I said before, you're going to pick, I want you to think about all of these questions, but in Canvas, you will pick one of these to answer in the little quiz, which is not a quiz grade assignment thingy on Canvas. Okay, last but not least, we have Fences by Pat Mora. Is there anything else I wanted to say about? No, I don't think so. Okay, so Fences, background information. This poem was inspired by Puerto Vallarta, a beach resort in Mexico. Many places, including Puerto Vallarta, rely on tourism as a major income source. This tourist economy, however, means that many locals must accommodate tourists who enjoy an affluent lifestyle that they themselves cannot afford. And that is essentially the focus of this poem. If you haven't read the poem yet, go ahead and pause, read, and come back. So, with Fences, you know, we start to think about the differences between what it would be like for the tourists to be at the beach versus the locals to be at the beach, and the sections of beach that have been separated and beautified and just kept at their utmost pristine perfection all the time for the sake of money, essentially. We have this one, I think, is, of the three, probably the most easy to determine literal interpretation of, to figure out what's going on and what the meaning is. That's my opinion, of course, but the repetition at the end, I think, really helps to rein in the overall purpose of this poem. And that, of course, is that this repetition at the end where it says it's their beach, it's their beach. Think about why we would want to repeat that. We repeat for emphasis. We know that from our rhetorical analysis lessons. Poetry repeats for emphasis too. What are we emphasizing? We're emphasizing the fact that the native people are outcasts essentially in their own land. Okay, good. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about for these three poems. Make sure to go on to the module for today's, on Canvas, today's module, to do the daily grade assignment for this particular poetry grouping, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.